Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series, produced and powered by citiesabc.com, openbusinesscouncil.org, and fashionabc.org. So in this series, we've been actually portraying some of the most fascinating personalities international, but as well the makers of the present and especially the makers of the future. And our focus was always to keep highlighting narratives for the present and special narratives for the future. I'm particularly very personally fascinated by the future, and I always look at it as a way of learning and as well making sure that we always, if we imagine the future, we can make the present better. And of course, the present is quite complicated, and as well, especially when it looks at all the different technology endeavors that we are facing as humanity. We have very big challenges, especially in the way we look at the fourth industrial revolution or society 5.0, how we look in terms of artificial intelligence, but as well how we create narrative. And that's the most important thing for humanity. So our guest today is precisely a person that has been reflecting about the future as probably few people in the planet, has achieved fantastic work and ethics around first of all, writing about the future, portraying the future, and visualizing the future. So I want to start before introducing my special guest, which I'm a very big personal fan, and I want to highlight that for people listening to me. So it's an honor to have him here. So we have today Gerd Leonhard. And I want to start with a quote from Marcus Aurelius, which was, as you know, one of the biggest personalities in history. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. So I think this probably highlights more than anyone else Gerd Leonhard, that is a recognized international author, speaker, futurist, and humanist. And I would love the futurist and humanist is very important. He is as well a filmmaker, a musician, and a renowned author with a book that made a lot of splash, and we're going to be highlighting that. And is as well the CEO of the Future Agency. Gerd did his basic studies in theology, which is particularly important, from the University of Bonn in Germany. And as one of the leading futurists worldwide, he's been looking at how we as humanity look at the present and the future, and has been presenting in over 1,500 leading conferences worldwide and events over the past 20 years in the fields of digital technologies, the internet, digital ethics, and as well has been a fluent experience in working extensively with big organizations and corporations and governments, the likes of Microsoft, NBC, Visa, Google, the European Commission, L'Oreal, Audi and IBM, just to mention a few. Gerd is a Forbes column contributor, and as well has been involved and participating in different organizations, from the Royal Society of the Arts, as a visiting professor in Brazil Foundation Dom Cabral, and a member of the World Future Society. And of course, I don't need to say about the media examples because it's been on all the media worldwide. But one of the things that I love about his work is how he actually looks at different areas, from the creativity to the ethics to the future. And as well, he is a trained jazz guitar from the Berklee College of Music, and dedicates significant life to music with the project licensemusic.com, Music Crypt, Popcom Innovation in Music and Entertainment Awards, where he was featured, and a lot of other things. He's also a filmmaker, and you can see a lot of his work both on his website and YouTube, which I really recommend for you to listen. And as well has been working, especially with the Future Agency, for a long time, and featuring a lot of network of organizations around the world. One of the things we've been working, and that for me is very important, is how we look at technology and society and narratives. And this is one of the areas that Gerd has been leading as one of the top personalities worldwide. He was named the Wired UK 100 most influential Europeans in 2015, and ranked 7th in the world global rankings of futurists. And I would say probably for me is one of the top first or second. So as well, he's been working with a lot of big corporations and organizations, and as well as different organizations that have been chasing and looking how we look at society in terms of technology in different areas. I think one of the things that I want to look as well, he wrote the book The End of Control in 2007, and changed as well the other one that is changed the title to Open is King, the Future of Media Behind Control, which I think is more important than ever, although it's already some years. And the book addresses the single moments important into underlying debates about the future and media. So I could go for a bit more because this profile speaks for itself. But more important, I'm very grateful to have you here, Gerd, and welcome to our series.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So, Gerd, I would like to in your case, okay, you are looking at the future of humanity, but you study theology. So theology is something that at the moment, and I would like to start probably with a provocation, both personal and as well intellectual. So in the end of the day, we are creating God machines, let's put it that way. And we are in a verge of, if you look at the last 30,000 years of humanity, we never changed much as a species, but now we are changing more right now in the next probably 10 years with AI than ever in history of humanity, with genetic modification, different things. But let's look at your personal background. So with all this thinking and as well reflecting and visualizing and as well looking at the practicals, because you have unique part, how did you get into this? And when did you decide to be a futurist and looking at this theology education for where you are right now?
Yeah, you know, when I was a student of theology in Bonn, that was a different part of my life. I was never actually religious. You know, in Germany back then, it was more like a kind of high-level social work that you would end up doing, you know, as a Lutheran minister. But I never got that far. I got 3 years into it. I learned a lot about, you know, learning bizarre languages like Latin and Greek and Hebrew and stuff, and also philosophy, which really interested me. You know, the question of purpose. And that was the most important thing for me, because as part of being, you know, a student there, I was also already back then, I was a musician, and then finally music took over, and that became my career for a long time as a musician and producer. But what I learned at the university is this kind of view of that it's really important to figure out what your values are, what destinations you have, what you want to have in your life, you know, what is the purpose, even if, you know, not religious now, just basic general purpose, right? And this has become a big theme in my work. You know, when I talk about technology, I always ask the question about, you know, what do we actually want with this? You know, do we want this to be like a purpose? So, you know, connectivity, the metaverse, you know, could become a lifestyle, right? A purpose. Or is it something that we use as a tool? Right? And the futurist thing, really, I didn't know what that was. A futurist, like most people in Europe, probably still don't really know what a futurist is. It's very Anglo, you know, American, UK description of a job. And then basically I started a bunch of internet companies in the late 90s, and I got into technology, digital music, and so on. And that got me thinking about the future. And I remember 1999 when Napster was first around, the software, free downloading software, Napster. When I was working in the music business, I said to everybody, you know, it's quite clear, music will move to the cloud. We're going to connect to the cloud, hit a button, and the music plays, right? And everybody thought I was crazy. Nevertheless, it did become, finally, of course, with Spotify and Apple Music, it became the final direction of music that we have now, 200 million people subscribing to that, right? And I wrote my first book, The Future of Music. And that was 2005. And from The Future of Music, I became sort of the guy that you go to for future scenarios, for mostly media. And that branched out into pretty much anything afterwards. So that's how I became a futurist, by people saying, well, you wrote a book about the future, you must be a futurist. And I figured it sounds good, so yeah, let's give it a try, right? And here we are.
Wow, that's a fantastic try. So it's a wonderful thing. So let's go back to your part of theology and philosophy, because I think it's something that is not pushed enough on especially on the future, and as well on technology in particular, because of course we are right now on a big challenge. So I would like to, so how do you look at when you do your research, and you have a considerable amount of research and writing, but as well keep visualizing as well, how do you put these angles? Because if you look at humans, and I'm sure in your history is more important than ever, because you have the creativity side, you have the philosophical and theological side, and then the technology side as a futurist as well, and the entrepreneur. How do you look at this part, especially the ideas part? Because I come as well from a literature background and poetry, and coming to the technology sometimes, now I think it's easy to mix, but it's quite complex to put the two things together, and especially if you speak with technologists or developers, and especially Silicon Valley or China, it's kind of a different ballgame.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, the first edition of the internet was essentially a place to where technology was like the biggest thing, you know, was going to make everything whole and fix all of our problems and all this kind of thing. And now we have to realize that technology is fantastic, but it doesn't solve every problem. I think technology can solve climate change, maybe. It can solve hunger and food and energy, yes. But we're still going to need a lot of policy, a lot of decision-making about doing the right thing. So I always say that we have all the tech and the science. We're inventing stuff every week now. It's just truly mind-boggling, right? But we're lacking the telos, you know, the will, the Greek word for will and the purpose. And I think when you look at humans, it's so important to realize that humans are not driven by technology. They're not, you know, we're not robots or data engines, you know, we have a lot more than that, more different kinds of intelligence. And humans are driven by experiences, by relationships, by emotions, by non-technical things, right? You know, humans are multinary. We can do many different things, not binary. Machines are binary, right? So we are really quite different than machines, even though some of it can be explained like a machine, like the working of the brain and stuff, right? But we are definitely not machines. And so ultimately, to me, it has always mattered a lot, is to safeguard what makes us human. Right? And that, of course, generally is called being a humanist, right? So, and being a humanist doesn't mean that everything else doesn't matter, like the world or the plants, the animals and the planet and so on. But all our environment and ourselves, you know, that is the top priority. I think that we have to look at everything that we do. It has to have a kind of flourishing aspect of helping us to flourish and helping our environment to flourish and putting it back into a natural combination of things, you know, a holistic view. And that's a very European angle that was quite difficult often to get across to Americans, for example, or in China as well, which is much more technology driven, or of course money driven, right, in the sense of corporate capitalism. Right? So that's always been a big story for me to figure out, you know, what is the purpose? Where are we going with this? Does it have collective benefit, or is it just another way to make more money? Which is okay, you know, but it doesn't have to be that way every time.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I have already immediately some questions on that level. But I want to go back to, so in your work, there's a couple of topics, and like you said, the futuristic and the humanist have been always working together. So in terms of your work and as well research, I know that you have a lot of topics that you are right now researching, but there's a couple of them that you are more looking for. So what would be, for instance, if you look at the one of the things that you have in a lot of things you do is practical wisdom, and how to pursue the practical wisdom, and as well how we can actually get humanity in the middle of all the complexity of what the society that we have right now. And you have as well something very interesting, there's EQ, so, and meets IQ. So do you want to highlight this and as well the foundations of your futuristic vision?
Yeah, I mean, I take a holistic view of people. I think that we are, in many ways, compared to machines, we're actually very inefficient. And we break down, we change our mind, we lie, we make mistakes, right? We're the opposite of machines, but we're also very efficient as a machine. Our brain machine is extremely efficient, the human brain. But I look at this and I say, okay, really what is important to our future is to emphasize the things that make us human, because machines will surpass eventually, already are in some ways, our logic, right? And our memorization and our computing capacity. That's probably going to happen within the next 10 years, you know, so that a machine in principle can know everything, which humans can't, right? It can see everything, right? But humans, of course, see things very differently. So to me, this kind of understanding of what we are and how we can make that go into the future has become a key theme. For example, when I speak about work, I always say that the future of our work is to do things that machines can't do. And that's always been true, of course, right? But now it's especially true because machines can, you know, look at my financial well-being. They can, of course, robots can do our production work, and cars can be self-driven and so on. But many things that we do is very hard to automate, right? The moral edge paradox, whatever is easy for a computer is hard for a human, and vice versa, right? So I look at these things like the EQ and I say, really what is important to us is, humans have 8 different kinds of intelligences. We have emotional intelligence, EQ, we have kinesthetic, the body, right? We have social intelligence. None of that a computer has, or could have. It doesn't have a body, it doesn't feel, it doesn't know music, right? It doesn't understand what feelings are. It can see them, but it doesn't understand them in the sense of that we are. So we are very holistic in our intelligence. And that's why we're so far ahead of machines. It is not impossible that machines will eventually be able to simulate that. Once we have unlimited computing power, yes, and nuclear fusion, that may be possible. But the question is, do we want that, right? I always say that that's one of my key topics now, is to say artificial intelligence, for example. We should make sure that those machines are competent. They can get the job done, whatever the job is, whether it's medical or driving or flying an airplane. But I don't want the machine to be conscious, sentient, have human agency. Why? Right? I mean, that's what we do, right? So I think we should cut it right there and say, okay, an artificial general intelligence, a super intelligence that can be like a human and become sort of half sentient, be very dangerous, and also completely the wrong direction is not what we need, right? So this is one of my key arguments when I speak about what I call the good future. And we are right here, right now, also because of the war, Russia, Ukraine, and because of COVID, we're sort of at the pivot point of a new era, There's a lot of things are being questioned, and a lot of things are coming forward from the millennials and the Gen Y that are saying, we don't want a life like you guys in your 60s or whatever. It's going to have to be different. So there's a great pivot point now towards a new way of looking at things that goes beyond the usual description of, work and job and profit and growth.
Yeah, there's a lot of things over there that are really very fundamental. So I want to go to the part of AGI, but before that, so I mentioned one of your books, but you have 5 books, and of course the last one was probably the most successful one. So you have The End of Control, 2007, for people listening to us, and you are quite generous because you are offering these books on your website. You have Music 2.0 essays from 2009, The Future of Music 2005, and then you have Friction is Fiction 2010, which is about the future of content, media, and business. The Future of Content 2013, which is actually a very powerful book, and then The Future of Business. And then you have The Technology versus Humanity, which is actually a very interesting.
That's my key topic.
Yeah, and I think that let's look at this particular, and I think if you want to highlight a bit of the history of the books and research, but what I'm interested here, you touch a very important point. So the human sentient, where is the stage we are right now? And actually there's already a couple of, for instance, I'm working in AI, and at the moment I'm actually becoming scared with what I can do with our teams. So, and of course, there was recently the Google engineer that was fired because he said that one of the AI chatbots became sentient. And I don't think we are very far from that. But one of the things you touch is we want the machines to serve us, and like you said, the good future. But at the moment, the challenge is, and I will probably go to, I don't remember the quote completely from Sally Krabrick, is that humans are a bit like, they can be a fantastic force for good, but they can be as well as a virus that destroy everything around them. And if you look at the last 30,000 years of human, at least Homo sapiens, definitely we would destroy a huge part of the globe to build our own habitat. And of course, that was partly for survival, but part for evolution and part for humanity. So if you look at technology versus humanity, your last book, which is all about these areas. The challenge that we are right now is that, are you seeing technology as a part of the evolution of our own humanity that will be replacing us, because that's what we did with the world, with humanity, or a bit more a vision that is more humanist, that effectively you can actually control technology? Because what I find, and I'm talking very personal, the challenge I'm finding as technologist and as an author as well is, as a technologist, is that if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to really get results, I really cannot be always on the good side of humanity. I need to be on the strong side of humanity. That doesn't mean I'm not good, but it's being good, you have to practice and take forward. And when you look at technology, if I put myself in the code that developers are doing in the UK or London or Russia or China, the ethics and different parts, and that is where it comes, I think, your expertise. I'm particularly interested in this, and I think this is the biggest challenge we're facing as humans right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much bigger challenge than climate change, right? For example, I know it's perverse to say that, but you know, climate change, we're going to solve. We have the tech, we have the science, we got to put the money in, we have to change our habits, but you know, we are going to solve climate change in the next decade or two. In that time frame, we're going to have to suffer through 2 degrees of warming at least, maybe more. But once we are there, we can work backwards, you know, because we'll have new tech to actually fix it, right? So that, to me, is a very much a concern because of the suffering in the next 2 decades, right? But generally speaking, I think we can do that. Yeah. What is really an issue is how much technology we are cultivating and creating that goes beyond our own understanding. Yeah, and that enables machines to connect to each other and basically create networks of super intelligences, and also, of course, can be used as weapons of war, which is the primary story of our technology, of course, nuclear weapons, and then very soon artificial general intelligence can be used for war, and beyond that, genetic engineering, right, can be used for the same purpose. So the thing is that we don't want to stop inventing, and we don't want to really stronghold technology or science to not develop, right? But we have to create a framework of what we desire as the outcome, right? And just like nuclear weapons, which we invented, and then we had 2 bombs, you know, we figured that not everybody should have a bomb because it was relatively easy to make. Well, not easy, but relatively easy, right? And we didn't want 100,000 bombs going off, right? That would be the end of it. So we had the Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? Now we're here with artificial intelligence, which by and large is just intelligent assistance right now. It's really IA, not AI, right? It's just smart software that does things better, right? But when we cultivate this further, and we're thinking about machines that have a potential logic IQ of, say, 1 billion, right? That would become a certain point where we are no longer, we can't contain it where it is, right? We would have to figure out what is the cutoff and who is actually in charge of this regulation, right? Is it everybody by themselves, or is it China versus America versus Europe versus Russia? Unlikely. Or India, right? I mean, that could end very badly for us. So my argument has always been that the important question is here, what do we want from this, right? And do we want to replace ourselves, or do we want to basically become superhuman? That is, of course, Elon Musk's argument, and also many others in the Bay Area, and Ray Kurzweil and others, right? So that we can live forever and compete or keep up with the machines. Right? My argument has been, if we did that, we would probably lose what makes us human, right? Because all these things like dying, right, or things that have been part of human life for a long time, they are definitely a part of who we are. And it's great if we can live a fantastic life to be 150. Yeah, that would be fantastic if it was available for everybody. But endless, right? And only the rich. And so we have so many issues piling up here that the most important thing is that we define what is the goal. Is the goal good for everybody, right? And is there a part of that process where we would lose control of what we are creating? You know, it's like the biological warfare labs, right? I mean, everybody has them. All militaries have them, but we don't want them to be uncontrolled, right? I mean, that would be the end of things. So I think that is a very, very important question. And that's why I've been talking about a moratorium on artificial general intelligence, not on AI in principle, but on the top level, to enforce collaboration. Because if we did have an AGI that was really just something that works for us, that could be amazing, right? But if we have one that is uncontrolled or that is competing between different nations, that could end very badly for us, probably much worse than a nuclear weapon. And so that's something I'm concerned about and working on quite a bit, is to find that balance between, you know, too little and too much.
One of the questions and one of the parts of your book that you have, of course, bearing in mind your base and your background as an intelligence and as well in creativity, is what makes humanity special is our capacity to create. At the moment, we have a lot of advances in technology that goes in these directions, but at the same time, there's of course something, and I love one of the topics that you have in your book precisely is digital obesity. So can you go through this topic, because I think it's particularly important and what is happening, but it creates digital obesity, creates as well digitally, I would say, laziness. And I think this is creating a huge problem because there's a digital divide bridge. And if you look at Harari in the Homo Deus book, one of the things he reflects is precisely the challenge that exists in terms of we are creating kind of human machines or human gods, or at least position God as the next iteration. Like you said, we can go to another 50 years, but the part of the theology and digital obesity versus digital laziness, or if you want to reflect a bit about this, it's the key element, because if you don't get this, definitely the machines will replace us. And that part is the challenge we have as humans, because it was always an elite that controlled the rest of humanity. And that elite theology at least was still respecting of values. Now the machines are respecting what are kind of algorithm positions that you don't control.
I think first we have to make a difference between the theology, religious part, and the general spirituality. And that is completely different. You know, I'm not religious at all, and I was as a kid, but 15-year-old, those kind of things you do at those ages. But I'm talking theology for people listening to us. Is theology in a wider sense,
exactly.
Not in the sense of religion.
Yeah, exactly.
That argument we can't win, and that leads down a very strange direction, right? So when we talk about consciousness and spirituality and human agency, it's extremely defined. It's like happiness. How you define happiness and how you get happiness. You certainly will not achieve happiness by looking for it, right? That's been a conclusion pretty much all along. But if we go down this direction, we're asking those really big questions. What we're seeing today, for example, around us is the fact that machines appear to be intelligent, kind of like us. So you can have a conversation with Sophia the robot, and you can ask GPT-3 in a chat, and it will give you smart answers, right? So what's happening now is that they appear to be like us, right? Because what they are doing essentially is collecting all the possible replies and replying very quickly, but drawn from a library of replies, basically, right? But they just much faster than they used to be. So they appear to be human, just like a robot can appear to be a woman, or I mean, these things are technically speaking possible, right? So the period that we're going through right now is this kind of appearance of having sentience or cleverness, But really what it is like going to a giant armor full of answers, trillions of answers, and pulling out the right one at the right time, and just being fast enough with that, right? But the machine has no idea what an emotion is, why I feel angry. It knows I feel angry by looking at my face, obviously, but it doesn't know what it means. It has no existence, right? So we should not confuse this kind of clever simulation, Westworld type thing, basically, right? We should not confuse that with actual being. There's a very, very big difference here, right? So a simulation or a photograph of something, right, is a simulation of something that exists otherwise in real life. Can be very useful, but it's not the same, right? So I think what we're looking at here, at least under, like Ray Kurzweil said, probably 2050, where we have the technical capacity to make it appear to be more human, right? And then we would have to define what consciousness is. But basically at that point, it may be theoretically possible. What we have today is a lot of confusion about what machines are, because they're so good at simulating, right? And this is really what also concerns me about the metaverse. We may enter a world where we have virtual reality around us, with expensive internet connections and glasses and everything, that we kind of get lost as to what this actually is, right? It's like a perpetual LSD trip or something. It's like we don't really know where we are anymore. And this is one of our key challenges. That starts with the mobile phone and the internet and VR. Is to figure out, what do we actually do, and what makes us human, and what is our destination with this? This is the important question, right? And so that is something I think we should keep a good eye on, because people are already escaping reality using the mobile phone and going to Instagram or and they live a very miserable life in real life, but then digitally they can be anybody, and that to me is a worrisome trend, because it's a dehumanization, and dehumanization can be good for us. I mean, you could argue that this is where we are going. I doubt it. Becoming a machine seems like something that most people would not aspire to, because we would lose everything else that we currently have, right? It would be a very bad deal for us. I think the best deal is this, right? We can use some of the awesome technology to live better and healthier and reach more things, right? And express ourselves better. But in the end, we're still quite on a different level than the machines that work for us. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So one of the chapters of your book, Technology versus Humanity, touches precisely what you mentioned, but I think it takes it a very interesting approach, because you have magic to manic to toxic, which is a chapter 6 for people.
Let me say one more thing about the obesity. I totally forgot about that
topic.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, this wasn't a big topic in the book, but it is a big topic. Digital obesity is basically too much of a good thing. That is the thing, the meme I use today, right? So too much of a good thing can be a very bad thing. Whether you're eating or smoking or drinking coffee or doing alcohol or whatever it is, we don't forbid all those things just because they can be bad. Well, cigarettes are kind of forbidden in many ways, right? But hey, you can drink as much alcohol as you want if you're grown up, right? In most countries, and kill yourself with that. But with technology, it's the same thing. Too much technology, constantly checking stuff and constantly being in the digital flow and not in yourself, creates disease, right? We have more people dying from obesity than from hunger today. That's already the stats, right? And digital obesity means you just have too many things coming in, right? Too many movies, too many TikToks, too many, and basically fills you up with all that stuff, and then you forget who you are, right? And this is what's happening in the gaming business, for example, right? Gaming disease, people that game too much online. And the metaverse could be that place to where all of that becomes normal. So you live in that place where it's too much all the time, and you're just there for the purpose of the metaverse itself, right? Not for yourself. And that would be a worry.
Yeah, I love that concept, and I think it's a big challenge right now, because in the end of the day, if you look at the history of humans, part of the challenge we had is to make us alert. And I think most of the people can stay hours entirely in one of these stream platforms, and they forget reality. And the reality, like you said, especially in the metaverse, is quite challenging. But I want to come back to the chapter that we talk about, because it's kind of the point that I love about the book is that you have very concrete things. So the magic to manic to toxic, because it is a big problem right now. Is in one end is I think society has the magic of technology, all the tools we have. We are in the best time of developing of humanity, but then the perception is manic and it's toxic, and that perception goes to the way we deal with us in society, the way we bully ourselves in social media, and as well the toxic is really the element. And we had a couple of very frightening moments in the last years. We have, for instance, the pandemic you mentioned before, that actually accelerated the digital part, but it accelerated as well a state that you can stay at home and be out of reality. And I think some people are still on that. So how do you see this? Especially, of course, the chapter is different, but yeah.
Yeah, social media makes a great example for this. In the beginning, it was magic. We can find each other, we can talk, we can bypass all the newspapers and the television channels, right? That was magic. I remember that. And then became a little bit manic, like we're obsessed with doing that just because it's there, right? And now it turns out it's poison, right? Basically poison. So using Facebook is a poisonous process now for most of us, because we don't know how they send us information. It's just an algorithm to sell ads, right? So Facebook makes $150 million profit per day, or they used to, a few months ago, make less now. But so, and they do that by creating an engine that sells us to each other and sells bad news, distorts reality, destroys democracy as a consequence, right? And that's not because Mark wants to do that. That's just because technology has evolved as to being extremely powerful. On top of Facebook having more information about people than the NSA, on top of that, it creates this advertising-driven, bizarre version of the world that distorts our way that we look at each other, right? And that is the toxic. So we really have to be careful. For example, when we have genetic engineering, same thing, right? It could be magic by saying, we're gonna know what gene causes diabetes. We're gonna tell you what's happening. You may get diabetes. You can take action. You can be better off, right? That's magic, right? But to do that with everything becomes manic, and then it would be toxic if we say we're going to do that with absolutely everything. You have yellow hair and green hair and blonde hair. You're tall or small, or you're male or female. We can engineer all of that, right? That would be toxic, right? Especially when it's for bad purposes, like building super soldiers, right? So I think this is really what technology does, and I think William Gibson said technology is morally neutral until we use it. And that is, of course, our biggest challenge. We can't stop making technology. We can't stop using technology. We just don't want it to all be toxic. You know, some of it, that's probably inadvertently happens, right? But we do have to keep an eye on, you know, right now the toxic level is very high in society, and people feel disgusted with the future. You know, especially millennials, they feel hopeless about the future because they don't see a way out, right? And that needs to change.
So one of the areas that you work and picking in what you just said is digital ethics. You have that as well in the book, Technology versus Humanity. For people listening to us, you can buy the book, download it, list the preview, but please read it. So it's one of the areas that is very strong in your work is digital ethics. So how can we work that, especially if you are a corporation, that you have to compete to achieve results, but at the same time you're using open AI and you use open source, but at the same time it becomes challenging, like you said, if you are in China, if you are in Russia, at the moment it's very toxic. So how do you see this digital tech ethics specific for business personalities? In the end of the day, the world economy right now is managed by global corporations more than countries. For instance, one example that I like to use is the reserves of money of Apple were biggest than actually the reserves of the money of German. When German was positive flow, now is negative. So, and this shows as well the challenge we are facing right now as humanity, which is not that they didn't do anything wrong, but it creates a huge disparity. And the digital ethics are increasing it on the personal, on the corporate, and the multiple levels more important than ever.
Well, I mean, this is a question of choices that we make. It's not a question of the system being any other way than we want it to be, right? I mean, the system is how it is because we're subscribing to Milton Friedman, right? The purpose of a corporation is profit. And, you know, Bobby Kennedy said in 1968 that GDP measures everything except that which makes our life worthwhile. Right, and that's been clear for a long time, and we keep making those choices, right? That's because their choices are driven by people who are part of an older paradigm, right? And now there's a newer paradigm coming in that has a much wider view of how all of this could work and how we could put it together, right? So I think the ethical part is just to define ethics here for a second, right? Is knowing the difference between what you have the right or the power to do and what is the right thing to do, right? There is a difference, right? So Mark Zuckerberg has every right to do what he's doing with Facebook. It's in the user agreement, right? But it's not the right thing to do. Right? And that is a big difference, right? So it's basically saying, yeah, I could be doing that, but if I did that, it would have a lot of negative consequences. And to look at the externalities, right? Just like Aramco, the Saudi oil company, has the right to increase prices or put out more oil, right? And this is what they're doing now. They're bringing out more oil for more CO2 and more killing of the planet, right? This is their right to do, but it's the wrong thing to do. So I think this is the ultimate question about the ethical part, you know, what is the destination and is everything okay just because I can? And the answer is obviously not, right? I mean, we're going to have a collective future, not an individual future. And if Aramco is a really rich company, that means that they can move to Mars and do whatever they want there with Elon, right? But we're still all going to die. And this is one of those things where, like, okay, ethics is now a big part of every company operation, the decision about what we want and how we're going to get there. And what does it mean to have this product, right? And that is now a completely different thing from 20 years ago, where everybody is expecting that companies also do the right thing, right? Like Patagonia, Unilever, IKEA, you know, other companies like that, right? And that is the new, that's become the new normal. So to me, ethics is no longer about the sort of after dinner conversation, like something you do as a sort of icing on the cake, right? It is the cake. right? It's like we decide what we want. That is the cake. It's not the other way around. Yeah.
My next question is, so one of the topics that you highlighted is, and I think from the core topics that you have, is the good future. So let's look at that, because it actually probably is a summary for everything we've been talking so far.
Well, this is the biggest topic. I did business futures and technology futures for a long time. That was really interesting. But a much larger question is like, how we're going to have a good future, which means most people living well, not dying, being able to feed everybody, self-realization, people having families, people having basic rights and civil rights, self-expression, the Maslow pyramid, right? Not all the way up, but to the middle, right? That would be good if we can have that. And we can, right? We have the technical means for that, right? So the key question is, how do we build a good future that is good for most of us, not just for some of us, right? And the answer is, well, we're going to have to, of course, use technology, but also change our policy, right? And to find the overall direction to figure out what serves good purpose and what does not, right? And first of all, it means collaboration, right? There will be no good future for America or China individually when it's about disease or energy, or there's no such thing, right? We only have a good future, all of us, or probably none of us, right? And that's become clear, especially with COVID and the Ukraine-Russia war. There is no such thing as an individual story of a good future, not even for Iran or for North Korea, yeah? So we have to create that together. And this is really what's happening now, is the discussion about how do we create a collectively good future, and who's in charge of that, and who defines how that goes, right? And who makes the rules, right? And that is a very, very big debate now. So I made a film called The Good Future, shot in the Canary Islands on Lanzarote, thegoodfuturefilm.com. And just 2 weeks ago, I made a new film called Twice Upon a Time, twiceupon-a-time.tv, that shows a really lousy 2030 and then a good 2030. So you can compare as to what your choices should be. Right?
I like that visualization, and it's wonderful. So to wrap up, and because we have limited time, so one of the things you discuss as well is the world in the future. So like you said, you just said that's the option A, option B. But how can we visualize better the future, especially if you are a business personality or a technologist, on the practicality? So from what you said in terms of big picture of the good future, how can you put that in practice?
Well, I talk a lot about the future mindset, and this is the most common problem I have with executives and board members. I do a lot of kind of coaching of executives and boards. And the future mindset means you're capable of executing today and making it work like it is today, but you have one leg in the future and you know what's coming, right? So Jeff Bezos, great example, right? Always has one leg in the future. Tim Cook, of course, Apple also, and Steve Jobs before him, right? To have one leg in the future and say, this is what's going to happen, and this is why we need to change and be part of that, right? The good future comes from that, and the future mindset is a question of training, listening, paying attention. I always say, like Bill Gates says, 1 hour every day you should spend in the future. And I'm not talking about Netflix here, right? Or Black Mirror or so. I'm talking about reading good books. That's how you get future ready. And future readiness changes your life, because you'll act different with your kids and your family and wherever you are, and of course in business, right? Because you develop this kind of ears, like seeing, hearing things, right? And then all of a sudden you say, wow, clearly I could be doing this, right? Whether it's business or private, the most important part is listening. And this is the number one thing that people don't realize. You can listen to the future. It's all, the signals are everywhere. But most people don't bother because, they're looking at a straight line that goes towards the next quarter or something, right? And that will kill us. The short-termism of the stock market and the short-termism of companies will kill us, because you basically run against the wall, you reassemble, and you go into another direction, right? Rather than branching out. And that is really what we need to do.
So I know that we are limited, so I will push my last one. So you recently did something about the next 10 years, where we have a series of reflection and fantastic videos that I recommend everyone to look. But can you tell that? Because like you said, that is a very concrete thing.
Yeah, in a nutshell, the next 10 years are bringing more change than the previous 100 years, right? Because technology is now finally capable of doing all that science fiction stuff. Quantum computing, Internet of Things, big data, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology. it just goes on and on. So the main thing is that we should be optimistic, because we have all the tools in our supply, right? We can do all these things that, like, deal with water and disease and all these things, right? If we work together on creating what it's supposed to do and how we're going to collaborate to make it fit the agenda of the good future, right? So that's why I talk a lot about the next 10 years, because in 10 years, we either have tackled the opportunity and improved what we do, or we're going to be much deeper into a bad scenario of, too much technology, too much automation, no social structure, loss of collaboration, and all of those things that we have already experienced, right? But much worse. So that's kind of where we are now. It's like a fork in the road moment, as I like to say.
Well, I want to be respectful for your time. I have a lot of more questions, and I hope we can do a take two.
Let's do a take two sometime.
Yeah, no, it will take, but we'll put all the links to your fantastic resources and videos and films. Any last thing you want to say to our audience, where they can actually more engaging and some last inspiring moments? There's a lot of inspiring moments here, but I always like to leave the voice to you.
I always say the future is better than we think. What we have to stop doing is looking at things from a bad side of things just because that's what happens in media and in social media. We have fixed and improved so many things. Like the list goes on, from poverty to inequality. Yes, there are many shortcomings, but we're constantly improving, right? So if we are wise and we collaborate and we look for the right goal, then the future is going to be amazing.
I think it's fantastic. I think with that, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being here, Gerd.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon. Okay,
thank you.
Bye.